Doody doo. What's up, everybody? Oh, well, hey, Brandy. Glad you could make it. Glad all you guys could make it. It's good to see you. I'm still kind of getting set up, but go ahead and get everything started. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. Like usual, if you've got any questions or anything, be sure to send them. Um, I don't know. We'll probably do some reading tonight. Probably hang out a little bit. Talk about stories and talk about stuff and just whatever you guys want to talk about. I'm here for you guys. I uh, I do hope you guys enjoyed the new Dr. Winter story last night. That was a lot of fun. It was nice to get back to business as usual there a little bit. It had been it had been like 2 weeks of 2 weeks of like story sets. So it was nice to get back to the voting and the regular stories and whatnot. Hi, Michael. Glad you could join us. I know you guys were hoping for a Stragview story yesterday, but vote just didn't quite swing that way. I was kind of hoping it would too, though. What I'm seeing right now, it looks like we've got a black site story coming up Monday, so that should be interesting. Which will be fun, unless unless you guys swing it towards the bright stuff, which black site rarely gets beat out by the bright stuff. Though we're kind of at a tipping point on both of them, so it could go either way. They're both on pretty good cliffhangers right now. Anybody got any story questions or anything? I'll gladly answer them. Sorry, voice is a little bit wrecked. I was doing recordings all day, trying to well, that 2 weeks that we had of doing like series stuff, I kind of got a little bit ahead on some of the stories, so we've got a lot to look forward to there. Um, I've definitely got the next part on a lot of them. I think I might keep doing that like every week, just write a little bit more. That way, I'm a little bit ahead of the curve there. That way, you guys don't have to wait quite as long, and it doesn't seem like I'm rushing to get everything done. But yeah, um, excuse me. I'm hoping for some good stuff. I've got a Christmas lineup, but it's not going to be near as intensive as the Halloween lineup. Um, I don't think I'm doing anything canonical for Christmas. Honestly, it'll probably just be short stories. Though the week of Christmas, I'd like to do like 5 stories, but it'll probably just be like unattached short stories. Honestly, um, I don't know. We'll do something. I I know you guys like your stories, so we'll definitely get you some holiday stories. It's not going to be anything close to the Yule Lads like we did a couple of years ago. That was a lot. Um, there are some Christmas things I'd like to do, but I think I'm going to save them for next year. When I've got the time, when I'm not quite as busy, and then I think we'll hit that. Any any questions? Anybody got any story stuff? Usually, at least a few of you guys have got pressing questions there, but I guess we could. Hey. Yeah, to those that come in, my sleep schedule is wrecked lately, so it's all been all over the place. So I'm getting tired at odd times of the night. No, nobody. Dang. Um, I guess we'll kind of like wait around a bit, see who else is gonna show up before we start reading. Let's see. Because I've got a few more short stories we can read. And I can do some recordings on. If you guys would be interested in that. I've got a particular one that's coming out next week that's going to be more of a end of fall story since Thanksgiving's coming up. I couldn't really come up with anything for a Thanksgiving story this year. Oh, I should have brewed some coffee. Nah, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel after all those Halloween stories, honestly. But I'm still a lot. I've got a lot planned for Christmas too, like I said. Well, hang on. There we go. That ought to help some. That'll mean you can see me even when I swap between channels, so. Not going to need that for a minute, so. There we are. Let's see here. Well. So I wonder, do you guys want some regular short stories or do you want some holiday short stories? Because I've got some ready for December. But I don't know if you guys want some just regular stories. I've got plenty of those. We could do a little of both, I guess. Really just depends. If I can stop yawning for 5 minutes. Let's see. Move some stuff around here. I gotta work on the timer on these lives. I think I'm like, the messages are like 30 minutes behind you guys. But I don't know how to do that. Well, we can do a little both, I guess. I have plenty. Let's see. I tell you what, I will read. Like I told you, I've got this one that I'm going to do next week because it's fallish. But I'll go ahead and read the fall one that way. Get a little bit of a jump on that one, I guess. Hang on, I got to move some stuff around here. I got to get the chat up so I can see you guys here. I should have brought some coffee. I always do, but I forgot today for some reason. Yeah, I should have brewed a little coffee to bring with me, or at least some tea or something. Something with some caffeine in it. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. This is a pretty good one. And we'll do you guys a live reading of next Wednesday's story, which is kind of a fall story. It's called The Cry of the Straw Men. And I like it. I think it's pretty good. I hope you guys do too. Alright. So. And I'll stop every now and again to answer questions and things, and probably to rest my voice since I'm old and not capable of just going right through anymore. Let's see. Get everything moved around there. All right. The Cry of the Straw Men. Make this a little bigger. I grew up in a small town that had more cornfields than people. It was in the middle of the Midwest, a place with one stoplight and only one decent restaurant that probably sells barbecue or cell phones now. It was a tiny place, but if you've eaten an ear of corn in the last 20 years, then it was probably grown somewhere in that area. My family was no exception. Every spring, when the snow finally melted, my dad and I would go out and do the first farming of the season, the rock farming. The only thing that seemed to grow quicker in that area than the corn was the rocks. I asked Dad when I was very young how we had so many rocks that kept coming back every year, and he would just shrug his head. Hang on. That's not the line. That kept coming back every year, and he would just shrug. All right. We would get all the rocks out of the field. Once or twice, we even stacked them up to make a fence, but it always fell down when the rain came. And then we would start planting our 80 or 90 acres for the season. It was a lot of work, but we always did the planting. The planting. It was a lot of. This is why text to type is not always the best way. It was a lot of work, but we always did the planting ourselves. There would be plenty of time during the harvest to hire people to help us, but Dad always liked to keep as much of our money in the family as he could. Mom and I would be out in the field right along with whatever farm hands Dad had managed to lay hands on that year, and by the time the last of the corn was harvested, there was always money in my savings account. Some of it was for me, but most of it was for college. Dad was always very strict on the idea that if I wanted to do more than pull rocks out of the ground and grow corn, then I needed an education. He let me go to school as often as I could, but it was just he and Mom and I, so I ended up missing some during the planting and the harvest time. Text to type likes to take some liberties sometimes, so I may have to stop to fix little things because my OCD is real bad. Uh-oh. I clicked on something. There we go. For those of you guys just joining us, we're reading The Cry of the Straw Men. So, hope you guys are enjoying it. Right. What I remember most about those times were the straw men that we set up in the fields. That and the weird noises that they made. Dad and I would make about 20 scarecrows every year and set them in the field. We usually got the clothes from the ones that were too small for me, or from the rag bag at the church that even the homeless people would turn their noses up at. It was a regular southern social out there, most years. Scarecrows in tube tops and little shorts, fellow scarecrows in chambray shirts, scarecrows in old jackets and sweatpants, and anything else we could lay hands on. We always donated clothes back at the end of the year, but I think the church mostly just threw them away after that. Oh, hi, George. Good of you to join us. All right, there we go. Aside from the clothes, every scarecrow got a wooga horn. Wooga horns, or wooga horns, were what Dad called them. I don't know what they actually were called, but he would take old cans and stretch a piece of resin string across the mouth. Then he would hang them off the hands of the scarecrows and dangle them from hats, like the earrings of fancy ladies, and when the wind blew through them, it would make a strange sound. It was like a wailing, and it sounded damn spooky no matter what time of day. Change a couple of things. If any of you guys have ever made these, they're really good at keeping crows and stuff away. My granddad actually used to make these too, and I've read about them. If you've read the book It by Stephen King, they're in that one too, though I think they call them moose blowers. Granddad always called them wooga horns. I don't know why. But you take a piece of string with resin on it and you put it over like a tin can, or he used something else, but I can't remember what it was. Tin cans were most of it, but it, like, once the wind hits it, it makes a weird warbly sound. It's kind of cool. You can make your own at home. Let's see. I've been out in the field on a windy day, the sun shining overhead, and felt a shiver run down my spine as one of those lonesome cries comes creeping up out of the cornfield. Excuse me. The story I'm going to tell you about is one that happened when I was in high school. It was the year right before I went to college, and it was ultimately the reason I returned to the Midwest when I was done. After what I experienced that picking season, I feel I have a duty to the place. You see, it all started when Dad caught the crud. Dad was a big guy, no shrinking violet, and I don't think I'd ever seen him sick with more than a... Blech. You should try it. They're pretty cool, especially if you've got like a big garden or something that that the wind blows through often. And I don't think I'd ever seen him sick more than a half a dozen times in my life. Any other time, I've been... If I could read... Any other time I've seen him sick, he had always just muscled through it. He would drink his juice, probably dosed with some corn whiskey from under the sink, and he would hack into his handkerchief as he worked in the field, or... Ugh. Got the burps. And he would hack into his handkerchief as he worked in the field, and he would just get over it. He never belittled me for staying in bed when I was sick, but he was never one to take time off because he was feeling punky. The crud, which was what he called it, was something a little different, though. Dad woke up one morning at the end of October and was doing a lot of coughing into his handkerchief as he ate his breakfast. Mom had asked him if he wanted something for it, but he shook it off and said he was probably... He shook it off and said it was probably just his allergies. He would work a day in the field and hack it out of his system and be right as rain in a couple of days. If you're just joining us, we're reading The Cry of the Straw Men, so pull up a chair and enjoy. Well, a couple of days came and went, and Dad was far from right as rain. I had to come home in the middle of the day to help him in the field, something I did quite often in those days since my studies were all done. And when I heard a strange noise from the road beside me, I looked up and saw that he had fallen over amidst the corn. When I tried to help him up, he could... Dang it. When I tried to help him up, I could tell that he was feverish. The fever was baking off of him, and he was nearly delirious with it. I helped him inside, told Mom to call the doctor, and when the doctor got there, Dad came around enough to answer his questions. He still claimed he was fine, wanted to get out of bed and get back to work, but the doctor told him that if he did that, he'd be dead inside of a week. He was running a fever that was about 102, and he was also dehydrated. Add a few things here and there. Half in the middle. Ooh, snow sounds pretty good. I could deal with some snow for definite. I saw another one. Hang on. I'll find it later, I guess. I recommend bed rest, lots of fluids and juices, and medicine that doesn't come out of a ceramic jug, said the doctor. He said the last, looking pointedly at my dad, clearly guessing where most of his medicinal notions came from. I remember bringing food to my dad and asking how he felt while he stayed in bed. He always said the same thing. He said it was nothing but a little cold and that he would get over it soon and he'd be back in the field before the harvest was due. Well, that time never seemed to come, and Dad was still in bed when Mom started making preparations for Thanksgiving. I think now, looking back on it, that he must have had pneumonia or something, because he was prone to being sick in the late part of the fall for the rest of his life. It always seemed to come back around Halloween, and Dad would often hire people to bring in the final harvest so that he could rest and be ready when the cold weather came. For those of you just joining us, we're listening to The Cry of the Straw Men, so have a seat and come listen. So, I was the one that had to organize the final harvest that year. There was still fields to be tended if we wanted that last batch of corn, and I found myself in the field after dark plenty of times that year. I don't think I had ever heard the noise before, but I think I remembered subconsciously that I had somehow. I have these foggy memories from childhood times when I couldn't have been more than about 5 or 6, waking up in the night and hearing the wooga horns in the field and thinking that they had to be moving. The lonely sound they made would move from right to left across the field, and sometimes they would go back as I lay there in bed and shivered. There were also times when my dad... Shoot. Yeah. Let's try that one again. There. There were also times when... Can't talk today. Find my spot. There were also times when my dad would ask me if I had moved some of the scarecrows, but I always told him that I hadn't. The scarecrows weren't toys. He had always made that clear enough, and once we set them, they weren't to be moved until the first snows came, and it was time to put them away again. Trying to do live edits over here, I guess. The first week he was in bed, found me in the field after dark as I tried my best not to disappoint him. I was tending just one row left, really trying to get as much out of it as I could, and thankfully I had the moon overhead to help me. It was full and round, and the light it sent down was better than any porch light. The wind wasn't too fierce that night, but I could still hear the wooga horns on the scarecrows from farther back in the field. I knew that dinner would be ready soon enough, and I was surprised that Mama hadn't called me already. As I prepared to head inside, I heard that lonesome cry a little closer this time. It made me shiver as I decided to pack it in and get washed up for dinner. One thing that the text-to-type likes to do is put way too many commas in there. Okay. As I moved through the field, I could feel something watching me. The moon would cast its shadow down on the corn rows, and in that light, I could see something as it scampered between the rows. It was too fast for me to see, too slick to be caught by some half-grown man, but I could still hear that spine-chilling noise it made as it... Damn it. But I could still hear that spine-chilling noise it made as it made its way over my senses. At first, it was just one, then two, then four or five. They would stop and start, sometimes sounding miles away the next time I heard them, and my feet itched to run. I made myself walk, however. You didn't run from predators, I knew that, and when I got to the back porch, it took all my senses not to turn around and look behind me. I didn't sleep well that night, and it wouldn't be the first time. Excuse me. When the men came back to help us harvest, I was yawning and stretching as I took my coffee out onto the porch. "Where's the boss today?" said one of them, and I grimaced as I recognized the voice. His name was Michaels, and I didn't much care for him. He hadn't done anything to warrant it, but I had a feeling. Have you ever seen somebody look at you and just knew they were up to no good? This... excuse me. That was this fellow. He looked like a rat, and he smelled twice as bad. Most of the hands Dad had hired stayed at this little motel about a mile from the farm, a place that gave discounts to hands we hired. But I suspected that Michaels was sleeping rough in the woods beyond our east field. He came to work dirty, in the same clothes he was wearing the day before, and stinking of sweat. He didn't seem to mind, and he picked corn like a madman, so neither did we. Still, when you were out in the field with him, especially when no one else was around, it was like being inside a sick person's head, all that dull heat and red madness swirling around him like a miasma. At the time, I thought my apprehension around him was nothing but exhaustion. Those wooga horns had been keeping me up nights, and I was ready to drop and irritable as a stepped-on cat. I was prone to being short in those days, and a lot of the hands mumbled about how the son was certainly not the father as they picked. Not Michael's, though. He just kept right on smiling his rotten-toothed smile whenever I was short with him and accepted my money at the end of every day. Then, every night, I lay in bed and listened to the Woogahorns as they moved through the fields. Hey, Amanda. Happy Saturday. Glad you could make it to our little live stream here. We're reading The Cry of the Straw Men, which is a brand new story I'm putting out next week, so you guys get to hear it first. Yay. I laid awake for nights, wondering how they did it. Surely the scarecrows weren't moving, but what other reason could there be? It didn't make any sense. Straw men did not, as a rule, move on their own. That was a fact. I told myself this again and again as I lay in my narrow single bed, repeated it to myself again and again, but the more I said it, the less secure it made me feel. It was Friday, the last day of picking, before we picked. Can't talk. It was. Hey, it's Jennifer. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the sneak peek there. It was Friday, the last day of picking before we packed in for the year, and the clock on the nightstand said it was 2 in the morning. The wind had been light but steady all night, and the sound of the Woogahorns had been just as steady. Sometimes I couldn't tell if I was asleep or awake. Those Woogahorns were in my dreams as often as they were out of them. They moved in the fields, sometimes right outside my window, trailing a ghastly woo, woo behind them like a crooked tail. I had always come out onto the porch to make sure I wasn't dreaming. No, that's not the line. I had actually come onto the... Try that again. I had actually come out onto the porch to make sure I wasn't dreaming, wanting to see the cornfield so I could prove it to myself. I never dreamed of the corn. My dreams were always very lively, and I thought that just seeing all that corn might convince me that it was real, if it was. So there I stood on the front porch, my chest prickling in goose flesh in the end of November cold, and squinted at the field. No full moon tonight. The moon was little more than a ghostly sickle as it hung over the field. The wind rustled the corn, what corn was left, and the empty stalks made a sound like bones in a holler. The next week they would all be yanked up and ground down, fertilizer for next year's crops, and the field would be as barren as my face after a good shave. Today, however, the stalks made for a ghostly clatter as they jittered and danced in the wind. I heard no lonesome wail now. I heard no lonesome wail now, no querulous call from the open throat made of string, and the longer I stood there, the sillier I felt. Clearly, I had been mistaken. I had been hearing things, jumping at shadows, and now I could return to my bed with the knowledge and the sound of that first lonely note as it rose above the fields made my skin break out in skitters that had nothing to do with the chill. In the thin light of that sickle moon, I could see the timid light repeated myself. In the thin light of that sickle moon, I could see shapes amongst the corn. They were human-shaped. They moved as humans do. But something about that movement wasn't quite right. It was the way A man might move if he had no bones, no spine, nothing to hold him together but skin and the loosest kind of tendons. They moved like loose corn husks in a breeze, and those horns came behind them, sounding their eerie midnight orchestra. There were 4, then 8, then as many as 20, and as they came before to the front of the house, they all turned their ghostly faces towards me. Yeah, no, that's the line. Their oil-slick eyes looked at me from behind sackcloth faces. They were hunkered down, ready to fly at me at a moment's notice. I was 5 long steps from the door, but it felt like a mile. I didn't like this. Why had I come out here? Why was I such a fool to need proof? The longer I stood here, questioning whether or not this was a dream, the more sure I was that I had to be dreaming, and the less sure I was that this could be real. They were staring at me, staring through me, and as I bolted for the door like a scared rabbit, staring. Yay! I hadn't got confirmation yet, Jennifer, so I was hoping you would get it soon. Oh, no, Amanda, I've got one of those big weird concave concave monitors. Like, it's kind of cool. I wish I had a dual screen. I think when I set up in my new office after I move, I might look into it though. Oh, where were we though? Staring through. And I bolted for the door like a scared rabbit. I was through it and had it closed tight before they could get me, but the expected bang of the straw men against the door never came. I stood with my back against it, shivering hard enough to rattle the glass, but the longer it went on, the more I began to doubt what I believed I had seen. I leaned around slowly, coming up on my toes as I peeked through the glass at the top of the door, but all that awaited me at the other side was the murky wavering of corn in the field. I stood there for a long time, just looking, watching, waiting, but none of them showed their face again. I went to bed, but the call from the Woogahorns was loud and mournful, and my sleep was thin and restless. I thought for the dozenth time about talking to Dad about the sound, but as he loosed a loud, wet cough from the guest room, a room that had become his sick room, I put the thought aside. I wouldn't bother him with such things that were likely just in my own head. I drifted off in the wee hours, the sun already a promise on the horizon. Oh, I've missed a few. Well, I would hope that you've all got the Amazon address there so that you can get your own copy, but I can put it up if you want one. The Bleak Vista is pretty cool. I think you guys will like the one that's going to come out this year too. Then, like I really need to get started on that cover, but I've been lazy. Hang on. I haven't forgot about you, Amanda. Hang on. I will get you a link. Ugh. Okay, that's what I thought. Alright, if you follow this link, that'll take you to my profile on Amazon, and that'll get you all, God, I think we're up to like 10 books now, come to think of it. 2, 4, 6, 8, yeah, I guess, well, no, there's more than that, shoot. 3, 6, 9, 11. We've got 11 books. Though you don't have to order Figurin's Disciples. That's a fantasy novel. I will not take it amiss if you don't want to order that one. And a lot of them are free on Kindle Direct or Kindle Unlimited. If you do that, I've put a lot of these on Kindle Unlimited because I really like Kindle Unlimited. Anyway, where were we? Promise on the horizon. Okay. The next day, we worked like madmen to get the last of the corn boxed up and ready for market. Michaels was there again, packing boxes with the rest, but I couldn't help but notice the way he watched my mother and I as I couldn't help notice the way he watched my mother and I as we worked. My father had been bedridden for nearly a month, and maybe he had started to think that he had run off on us, and we were simply trying to get by. I don't know what exactly he was thinking, and I'm glad I never found out. At the end of the day, all the corn was packed neatly in the barn for the last of the trucks to get tomorrow, and I handed out the day's wages and bid them all farewell till next year. The others left, talking about going to the bar or heading to the barn dance later that evening, but Michaels lingered for some reason. Yeah, I asked him. Was there something you needed? I was just wondering if I might take a meal with you and your mother tonight, he said, smiling rottenly through his brown teeth. I've got a long journey back tomorrow, and a hot meal might send me on my way quicker. Sorry, we haven't enough extra for a fourth. If it's a hot meal you're after, you might try Katie's on your way out of town. No room for a fourth, he repeated, smiling like he knew better. If you say so. He left, but I felt sure that he hadn't gone far. As I went about the task of shuttering the barn and securing the farm, I felt eyes on me. These were not the black eyes of the straw men that I had seen the night before either. These eyes didn't come with the lonely call of the Wooga horns, but felt more like the eyes of some predator who was sizing up a meal. I put my hand on my knife in my pocket more than once, hoping I wouldn't need it, and when Mom called me in for supper, I locked the doors before going to wash up. I didn't tell her what I suspected as she went to take Dad his dinner. There was no sense worrying her needlessly, and she had more than enough on her plate without my tired megrims. See, I feel the same way, Jennifer, but my mom's the same way, but she loves the Kindle books. Like, she's like, I can take a whole library with me in my bag, so it's always nice. I know some people are big on those Kindle books. And of course, Amanda, if you want to get with me like Jennifer usually does, I can send you a copy. I'll even sign it for you. I think there's an email address on the YouTube. If you want to get with me there, I can send you a personalized one. Let's see. After dinner, I tried to stay awake a little, but ended up falling asleep on the couch instead. I was exhausted, too tired to worry about strange eyes or strange sounds, and when I came awake suddenly in the middle of the night, I felt a blanket thrown over me slip to the floor. I wondered what had woken me up at first, thinking I might just head to bed while I was feeling sleepy, and that's when I heard it again. It was a loud, tortured scream from the field, and I was up and moving before I was fully awake. I came out onto the front porch, the shotgun we kept by the door already in my hand, and I was working the slide as I tried to gain control of my galloping heart. The wind was up again, those wooga horns practically screaming amidst the bare stalks, but it didn't drown out the piercing shriek of whoever was being murdered in my family's field. From the porch, I could see those familiar boneless shapes as they scuttled across the field, but tonight, they didn't bother to have any... Hang it. But tonight, they didn't seem to have any time for me. No, Jennifer, I think we all love that nice pagey smell of books there. Yeah, absolutely. Amanda, please do. Just send me an email and I'll get you my PayPal information and you can pay me directly and then I'll send you a signed copy. Let's see, where were we? They were moving away from the house towards the east field, and as they crashed amongst the empty stalks, I heard the same scream yet again. I hesitated on the porch, still not sure I wanted to go crashing off into the corn, but finally I found my courage as I headed into the night. If they were killing someone out there, then I needed to put a stop to it. I went running through the corn, the skeletal stalks slapping at me as I went, and as I came through the farthest row beside the fence, I saw it. They were huddled around it, their faces turning as they regarded it, and when I shouted at them to clear off, they flew like straw in a high wind. It was Michaels, all curled up in the fetal position, and he was dead. I had to get pretty close to be sure, but his chest wasn't moving, and he was lying much too still to be alive. I touched his neck, careful not to touch anything else, and when I didn't feel a pulse, I left him there in the field so I could call the sheriff. He came with an ambulance from the home central, and the guys in the truck said it looked like he'd had a heart attack. His face was set in a rictus of fear, and he had clutched his legs so hard that he had left bruises on them. The sheriff thought I had done something to him at first, but when I explained that I had just found him screaming in the field like that, I think he started to think otherwise. He told me he'd look into it, and a couple of days later he came out to the farm and apologized for suspecting me. "Turns out," he said, taking a seat and inviting me to sit as well, giving that my... Hang on. Given that my father was still bedridden, "That man your father hired was named Charles Tilley. Charles, or someone who fits his description, is wanted for questioning in a string of home invasions, many of which turned violent. Far as I can figure, he signs on to work at farms and orchards for a season, doing picking and packing and such, and then, after everyone else has left, he robs them, and sometimes he does a little worse than that. The last one was a recent widow and a young son, and after he robbed them, he took a little more from them than their lives. Both of them," he emphasized, giving me a square look. I let that sink in as we sat in the rockers, listening to the wind blow the dirt off the recently tilted... That one again. Listening to the wind blow the dirt off the recently tilled down field. "You and your mama are very lucky, boy. Probably your daddy, too. He likely intended to do for all three of you and take whatever you had in the house before he had his little heart attack." He took his leave then, saying if I needed him, all I had to do was call. After that, the sound of the wooga horns put me at ease. It was still a little spooky to hear from the fields, but it let me know that the scarecrows were looking out for me and Mom. Dad, once he got better, laughed when he saw the scarecrows in the field well into December and asked if I liked them that much. I told him I did, and from then on, the scarecrows never went back in the barn unless the wind was very bad. I live in the town now, working as an accountant, but I still help Dad in the fields when he needs me. I still listen for the lonesome cry of the Woogahorn, too, listening out for the straw guardians that saved me from a very bad man one night in November. All right. Whew. I'm going to need something to drink before I do another one of those. But yeah, that was The Cry of the Strawmen, and that'll be coming out next Wednesday. So look at that. You guys helped me out immensely there. I appreciate that. Which one, Jennifer? There's like 2 or 3 of them now. You want the original one? Let me finish editing this first so I can get it saved. Hey, Nikki. Good to see you. Because if I don't go ahead and edit it, I will completely forget. Yeah, I can read the original one. Let me get a little something to drink. My throat's getting scratchy, and I'll read it for you. It is that time of year, I suppose. Oh, Jennifer, that thing we discussed for the Dr. Winter story didn't happen in this one, but I am working on it. Like, I haven't forgotten about it. I just gotta find a way to generically add it in. When you had asked me, I had already written 2 stories already, so I kind of already had those ready to go. Let's see. There it is. Nikki, I have no idea. I think beginning of the year is what he's after, but I don't know. Um, he's kind of put me on hiatus for the moment. But again, I don't want to speak for him. But yeah, at the moment I'm just kind of on hiatus from it at the moment. Alrighty. Tell you what, guys, talk amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes. I'm gonna go get something to drink real quick. Throat's feeling a little scratchy. Be back in like 2 shakes. So, be right back. All right, I'm back. Told you guys it wouldn't take very long. Let's see what I've missed here. Freddie, Jennifer, definitely. Let's see. Trying to remember which one. That one was in. Ain't that the truth, Brandy? I could stand for it to be a little colder. Is it in that one? It's always 2 shakes. 3 shakes is just too many. No, I think it's the other. I could have swore I was in this one. Give me a second, guys. I'm trying to find the Soap Sally story. And I will totally get back with you guys. Four? I think maybe it's 5. There it is. Found it. All right. Well, Jennifer has suggested that we read The Night I Met Soap Sally. So I think that's what we're going to read. Hope you're all ready with your beverage and whatnot. And I shall begin. The snowstorm was one of epic proportions. It closed the schools for 3 weeks, right up until Christmas break. 4 days before Christmas, that was when I met her. Better not stay out too late or Soap Sally'll get you, my mom called to me as I went out the door to play with Rob and Terrell. I rolled my eyes at her, slipping my mittens on as I grabbed my sled from beside the door. Sure, Mom. I'll be sure to watch out for Soap Sally. That had always been Mom's little attempt to scare me as a kid. When I was younger, like 4 or 5, my mom would use it to make sure I was inside before the streetlights came on. I remember the first time she ever said it to me, the moment ingrained in my brain forever. I was heading out to play in the sandbox in my front yard, something Dad had spent all day building on his day off, and she had offhandedly told me to make sure I was in before dark or Soap Sally would take me away. I'd stopped, little pail and shovel in hand, and asked her who Soap Sally was. Let me see. My mother just shrugged and said it was something her mother had always said, and the two of us had used it as a kind of personal joke from then on. Better get the groceries in before dark, I would say to Mom, or Soap Sally might get us. Better hurry up and take out the trash, Mom would say. I think I hear Soap Sally prowling. We'd done it for so long, it had just become normal. But I wasn't a baby anymore. I was 12, and I knew that Soap Sally was just some boogeyman that adults used to scare kids. She was no more real than the Wampus Cat, another of my mom's colorful stories, and I put it out of my mind as I ran to join the others. Terrell had told us that his brother had told him about a big hill near Basker's Pond. It's so steep that when you come down it, you almost fly, he said. So I trudged through the fresh powder over the streets that no longer looked like streets at all, as we made our way towards the edge of town. My hometown isn't very big, one of those 2 stoplights and a gas station kind of places you always drive through on your way to somewhere else. There were maybe 20 kids my age in town, and the whole school was probably less than your graduating class. We knew we were living in a podunk town in the Georgia hills, and most of us dreamed of getting out after high school and doing anything but staying here. For some of us, that dream was actually realized. For others, the cemetery was all we had to look forward to. I met Terrell near Basker's Park, a small little picnic and play area that butted up against Basker's Pond. The pond wasn't huge, but it was a great place to swim and fish in the summertime and just enjoy yourself. Today, however, it was a winter wonderland of fresh snow and chilly wind. Terrell was bundled up to the eyebrows in a thick ski jacket, and his snow pants had little rolls in them that made him look like the Michelin Man. He too was clutching a battered old sled, and when he spoke, I could still see the air puffing from his mouth. Well, thank you, Starlight. Thanks for the super chat. I do appreciate it. Let's see what I missed here. Jennifer, I grew up in one of those 2 stoplight towns. I know they're pretty tiny. The place I grew up and the place I'm moving back to retire, it's only got 1 and like maybe a stop sign, and it sounds pretty good to me. About time. Where's Rob? That was when we heard a loud call from up the road, and Rob came running down with a banana yellow disc under his arm. He was wearing a matching ski suit and thick snow boots that seemed to be the only thing he wore that wasn't yellow. His voice cut through the sound of the wind like a foghorn, and I wondered if he were the only kid in the whole town not inside right now. And I wondered if we were the only people in the whole town not inside right now. It was a little spooky, even in the middle of the day. Took you long enough, Terrell said. Are you ready to sled? If this hill is half as cool as you say it is, T, then I'm ready to sled till midnight, Rob said excitedly. And with that, we set off. We had all seen the hill in question. Overlook Crest was the place to spread your blanket on the 4th of July to watch the fireworks, have a picnic, or sit and watch the boats that were fishing out out there during the warmer months. It offered a great view of the water, and as we trudged up the hill, it felt about twice as steep as usual. The snow made it slippery, and the three of us were laughing and pushing as we raced to the top. Terrell won, of course. Terrell was a beefy kid, and he was harder to push down than Rob, who was mostly skin and bones. Excuse me. We spent the day on the hill sledding, snowball fighting, making snowmen, and generally enjoying the day. Blizzards like this were rare, and we had been having a lot of days like this where we were just free to be kids and enjoy our childhood. Sometimes we linked up with other kids from school to have snowball fights or play games, but mostly it was just Terrell and Rob and me, enjoying the childhood that was before us. Enjoying our childhood before it was over. We had all expected it to end when we went to high school, the dying place of childish things, but none of us could have guessed that it might be something childish that ended our innocence. I didn't notice it was getting dark until the streetlights came on and sent a dazzle of diamonds up from the snow. "Oh, crap," I said. "Mom's going to be mad if I'm late." "Oh, relax," Rob said. "It's not like we got school tomorrow. As long as we're home before bedtime, why would she care?" Rob's parents were never home, leaving him in the care of his aunt or grandmother since they worked late. Terrell and I, however, had mothers and fathers that would expect us to be home when the streetlights came on, and I could see Terrell shuffling nervously too. We were all poised at the top of the hill, preparing to race to the bottom, and when Rob saw our looks, he rolled his eyes and jumped. "Last one to the bottom's a baby!" We all jumped then, putting on a burst of speed as we tried to catch him. As we came down, I began to hear a strange sound, a rumble of something rolling down the street, the jingle of an almost merry bell, and the hum of a gravelly voice. I looked around, trying to find the source of the noise, and that's when I saw her walking under the streetlight. It was an old woman pushing a wheelbarrow or a small cart. We were heading right for her, and Rob was turned around backwards so he could laugh and mug at us. "Rob," I shouted, "look out!" He turned just in time to smack face first into the cart. We swerved to a stop, Terrell and I running down the hill the rest of the way. We could already see the old lady bending over to inspect the prone boy, and under the glare of the street lights, he looked pretty bad. There was a big gash on his forehead, and blood was leaving red streaks down his yellow snowsuit. Rob was groaning when we approached him, and the woman looked up at us, smiling feebly as she rose to her full height. She was as wide as she was tall, and she was nearly 6 feet tall. She wore a voluminous black dress, her hair caught in a scarf or a kerchief that trapped it to her head. Her hands were liver-spotted, her fingers long and spidery, and they sank back into her sleeves. Blech. Can't talk tonight. The cart she was pushing seemed to be empty, and I figured she was on her way to pick something up when we had bumped into her. There was a bell attached to it, and as Rob flopped down against it again, it tinkled meekly. "Dear me," she said, and her voice was thin and spidery. "I didn't see you there, son. Are you okay?" We helped Rob to his feet, but he was very shaky and hardly able to stand. I was worried that maybe he had a concussion, maybe even a broken skull, and I went to help him home as quickly as I could. Terrell asked the woman if we could borrow her cart, but she said she needed it later and couldn't loan it to us. "But I'll help you back to my cottage so you can call for help. I'll make you something warm to drink while you call your parents and let them know what happened. Put him in the cart now, and you can help me push him home." Ugh. I'm going to grease the wheels there a little bit. Oh yeah, I forgot a video came out at 8:30. Which I shouldn't have. I'm the one that put it up. Let's see. I was hesitant. Mom was always clear about not taking rides from strangers, and certainly not going into their houses, But Rob groaned and wobbled, which made up my mind. Our town was so small, after all. We had never seen this old lady before, but what were the chances that she would want to hurt us? No one ever wanted to hurt us, and despite all the lessons about stranger danger, we had never ever heard of anyone getting kidnapped. We loaded Rob into the wagon, the bell jingling as we slid him in, and pushed it back the way she had come. As it turned out, the woman lived in the woods near Basker's Park. The tires rumbled over the wood chips that led to her house, and Rob groaned as he was jostled in the cart. We had left our sleds behind, and we moved unburdened towards the dark little cabin at the end of the long road. It looked spooky in the night, not a candle or a light to be seen. Oh, no problem. There's a couple of them, Nikki. I think this is actually like the third Soap Sally story I've written. I think one of them is about kids on a camping trip, and one of them is a grandpa story. "You can push him right in the front door," she gravelled out, and as we neared, something screamed at me not to go into that house. Common sense seemed to have reasserted itself, and when I paused on the steps of the front porch, the old woman and Terrell barely noticed. As the door came open, I could smell something like wax melting, the warm, aromatic smell of tallow. There was a floral smell as well, something akin to cooking bacon fat. There was another smell, though, something that prickled the hairs on the back of my neck, a coppery smell, a wet smell, and when I took a step back, the old woman seemed to notice that I hadn't come inside. She turned in the doorway, and we made eye contact for a few seconds before she asked why I wasn't coming in. "Good night, Nikki. We'll see you next time." I'm sure we'll do another one pretty soon. Shouldn't be too long. It's good that you could join us, though. We look forward to seeing you next time. Let's see. I just remembered that I thought of anything, and landed on a flimsy lie. My dad was coming to pick us up. If he comes to the park and we're gone, then he'll be worried. So I probably need to... I turned to go back down the cedar path, but suddenly her hand was around my wrist. I felt my breath catch as I looked back at those long, spindly fingers. The bones creaked beneath the skin, and the flesh around them was so thin that I imagined I could see those bones through the pale wrappers that surrounded them. As firm as her grip was, her skin was waxy and slick. It reminded me of nothing so much as candle wax, heated tallow, and when I looked into her face, I could see nothing human there. Her face looked like an exceptionally well-crafted mask, a mask made of human skin. "Come inside," she said, and I could see that her mask bore too much makeup. She had really caked it on, and it made her almost clownish. Whoever had applied it roughly. Her eyes were like black pits beneath that dark shadow. I whispered, my tongue dry, battering at my chapped lips. "I just need to tell my dad where Your father can't help you now," she breathed out, grinning with a mouthful of grinning with her mouthful of gravestone teeth. "But don't worry, you'll see him soon." She yanked my arm then, and I saw my one chance to escape. I pulled back hard and nearly toppled her from the porch, my arm slipping from her greasy grip. I was running flat out as she cawed angrily behind me. I didn't stop running till I reached my house. My mom was waiting for me on the porch, looking angry as I came running up. She asked what I thought I was doing out so late. She asked if I meant to meet Soap Sally, the one she had always joked about. She asked if I intended to freeze to death in the snow. All those questions went unanswered. All her anger disappeared as I wrapped my arms around her and told her that the old woman had taken Terrell and Rob. She called the police, but seemed angry when she hung up. She told me that they must have thought she was pulling some kind of prank. They told her that they would go right away. They told her that they would get right on it. And the next time Soap Sally came after her to make sure that there was less than a foot of snow on the ground. She sent me to bed, but my dreams were full of the old woman and her deep, pitiless eyes. In my dreams, she got me. In my dreams, she cackled as she peeled my skin off. I woke up the next day to hear Mom on the phone with Terrell's mom. He came home in a state last night. Said some old lady had Terrell, just like I told you last night. Didn't you find anything? I'll ask him once he gets up. If he comes home, let me know, please. She hung up the phone and came to talk to me. The police came by later that day to question me. I guess they were taking the disappearance of 2 children a little more seriously now. I told them exactly what I'd told Mom. Rob had hit his head. The old lady had offered to help us. We put him in the cart and pushed him to her house. I got spooked and tried to run, but she grabbed me. I got free and ran for the house. I told my mom what had happened, but the police hadn't believed her. It seemed like they were interested in the house now and asked me to take them to it. I gave them directions, but I refused to go anywhere near it. They came back and told me that the house had been abandoned for years and asked if I was sure. I told them I was, and they said all they had found was a little bit of dried blood and a black dress that might fit a horse. They didn't believe me, that much was apparent, but they believed me after the soap arrived. I woke up one morning, about a week after Rob and Terrell disappeared, and walked downstairs to the smell of breakfast. Mom was making flapjacks and bacon, and the smell turned my stomach a little as the familiar odors assaulted me. To this day, the smell of hot fat makes me want to puke, and the smell of it always takes me back to that house and that day. Sweetie, could you bring the milk in from the front porch? I looked outside. Snow's 3 feet deep, Mom. I doubt the milkman ran today. Well, I heard someone on the porch a few minutes ago. They left something and didn't knock. See if it's the milk before it freezes, please. Sitting on the mat was a small wicker basket. Sitting in a bed of black cloth were square packages wrapped in wax paper. I felt my breath hitch as I saw the cloth, but tried to shake it off. What didn't remind me of that old woman in the woods these days? I reached down to pick up a package and felt the semi-solid brick of soap as it smushed a little in my fingers. I unwrapped it, not sure who would leave soap on our doorstep, and that's when I saw the note. It was under the soap, written in a long, spidery hand, and the words sent a shudder through me that the winter chill couldn't stop. See you soon, it said. I felt the soap slip through my numb fingers. When it hit the boards, I looked down and saw something that pushed a scream up my throat. It was a bone, a finger bone. The police told my dad that it had been Rob's finger bone, but they found trace evidence of Terrell's bones in the other bars of soap. Both their parents had received similar baskets of soap, and unfortunately Rob's grandmother had brought hers to the bathroom. She'd been washing her hands with it all day, having no clue that she was washing her hands with her grandson's remains. My own grandmother came to visit a few days later. She and Mom had a long talk about something, and I got the feeling that Mom didn't want her to tell me something. As she shuffled to my room, I couldn't help but shudder as I imagined the door opening to reveal a huge woman in a black dress and a shawl, leering at me as she smiled her witch's grin. When my grandmother knocked, I told her to come in. She sat on the bed with me and seemed to think about what she meant to say. Oh, you got that right, Jennifer. Damn, that would screw me up for life. She sat on the bed with me and seemed to think about what she meant to say. I grew up in this town too, you know. One night, my friend Grace and I were late coming home from a church dance. We cut through the park, and as we passed by the sign that said, "Welcome to Basker's Park, we saw an old woman who was trying to fix her cart. She asked us to help her, get the cart to her house, and we obliged. No sooner had I seen her house, though, than I got a tickling feeling. My mother had told me about Soap Sally, too, and I suddenly realized what that smell was around her cart. It was tallow, lye, and blood. I ran as fast as I could, but I never saw Grace again. You got really lucky, kiddo, she said, giving me a little hug as her bones creaked in just the way Soap Sally's had. Don't press your luck, though, by being careless. She left me then, and we never spoke about it again. That was 5 years ago. 5 long winters ago. The snow is back, and the days are short, but I haven't left my home after dark since that night. I lost my best friends. Though I never saw her again, I know she's seen me. Sometimes I hear the grumble of that cart, the tinkle of the bell, and it sends me running home as surely as it did that night I escaped her. My greatest fear is that she will make good on her threat one day. One day, Soap Sally may leave me on my parents' front porch, their missing son, unknowingly come home. Oh! And that was the night I met Soap Sally. Oh yeah, Jennifer, we had a whole grandpa story about it, remember? I think that was season 1. That was right after I wrote this one. I got the idea that maybe Grandpa should meet her. Oof. Oh, well. Ugh. Voice is wrecked. Well, anybody got anything else? I'm open to suggestions. I got about one more story in me, I think. My voice is getting awfully crunchy. Excuse me. Or any story questions? I know I've got plenty of stories. If anybody's got any like series questions or anything, let me know. Let's see. Pizza I had for dinner is not sitting very nicely. Oh Lord, Jennifer. Let me see. That's the first one, I think. Officially the first Killian Barger story. Yeah, but it's gonna make recording tomorrow a treat if I blow my voice out tonight. I think we can do Paranormal Facilitator. Yeah, there it is. Like I said, for those of you who haven't heard it before, it is officially the first Killian Barger story. So, unfortunately, it takes it a while to get there. Like, if it was gravelly all the time, that'd be one thing, but it's usually a little higher pitch than I'd like. All right, let me get my best voice on here. When she opened the front door, her face was a study in relief. "Are you the paranormal investigator the agency sent out?" she asked, getting right to the point. She had once been a pretty woman, he had no doubt, but grief had aged her. She wore a simple pink dress with a sensible pair of black shoes poking from beneath the hem, and her chestnut hair was swept back into a messy braid. She looked like someone who had become used to living in a situation outside her control, determined but hopeful. He took off his hat, a tan Humphrey Bogart number, and smiled at her. "I'm from the agency, but they thought your case might need something special. That's why they sent me." She showed him in and took his coat before leading him to the living room. She introduced her husband, Michael, a tall man with a comfortable look of middle age, and introduced herself as Barbara. She sat next to him on the couch, brushing the wrinkles from her dress as she moved effortlessly into the protective shelf of his arm. He settled himself into a large red chair that didn't seem to match the other furniture at all. He took out a notepad from his pocket and licked the end of a pencil before beginning. "So, what seems to be the problem?" he asked, favoring her with a warm smile. "Wait," Barbara said. "When I invited you in, you said the agency had sent over someone special. Does that mean you aren't a paranormal investigator?" she asked. She said it carefully, as though she were afraid she might insult him with the question. He chuckled, getting this all the time. "The agency sent him, Barbara. I see no reason to," her husband began, but he put a hand out to stop him. "It's quite all right. No, ma'am, I'm not a paranormal investigator. My name is Killian Barger, and I'm what you'd call a paranormal facilitator." Michael crinkled his eyebrows. "Paranormal facilitator? What's that?" "Well, an investigator usually comes out to inspect the phenomenon and see if there's anything the agency can do for the client. Given the description your wife provided over the phone, though, I'd say we have enough data to go ahead and send out a facilitator, such as myself." "But what does a facilitator do?" Barbara asked. "My training has allowed me to communicate with the presence or presences in your home and help you get rid of them." Michael seemed shocked. "You can speak to them?" he asked, and Killian couldn't help a little chuckle. "Not exactly. We can make our presence known and inform the entity that their continued inhabitation of this house is undesired. So tell me a little about what's going on." And with that, he leaned back and lifted his notebook. Killian made notes as he listened, but it was a mechanical sort of dictation. These cases seemed to run along the same course most of the time. Furniture moved, doors and containers left open, disembodied noises or voices in the house. Excuse me. And an otherworldly presence felt by all who inhabited the home. He listened politely, but what he was really looking for were ripples. Entities in a home didn't appear as Barbara and Michael did. They seemed to ripple in and out of existence, like a stone making ripples in a pond when it impacts the water. As they spoke, Killian saw two entities moving about the house with a calm sort of familiarity. Both seemed to be adults, one a male who often moved between the kitchen and the back of the house, and a female who seemed to flit about the kitchen like a hummingbird as she stopped and did something with objects Killian couldn't see. He thought she might be on the phone with someone, but all he could pick up were her wavy, ripply voice with a sense of pleasure about some new experience or event. Killian had scribbled down the words "two entity incursion" before Barbara reminded him that he wasn't alone. "Then there's the child sounds in our bedroom." Killian snapped back. "Child sounds?" "Yes," Michael said. "We can hear a child talking and laughing and playing at odd times in our bedroom. One night we woke up with a terrible wailing, and we spent the rest of the night in the living room with the door closed. Come morning, though, we went back and found the door wide open. The covers on our bed were a real mess." Killian scratched out 2 and wrote 3 as he amended the notes to reflect the child's presence. "Very well, then. I think I can help you. But but it won't be easy. Sounds as though these entities have a certain amount of familiarity with the home, so we'll have to force them out." Barbara looked at Michael in confusion before looking back at Killian. "How do we do that?" "I don't think it'll be all that hard, but we may need to act quickly. I'll stay in your home tonight, if you'll allow me, and make notes on the situation. By tomorrow, I have little doubt that I'll have formed an attack plan to push these intruders from your home." That seemed to brighten them a little, and Barbara was happy to show him to the guest room. It was a simple room, a bed, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto the backyard. But Killian didn't need much. He set his bag on the bed and began to compile notes. This was far from his first encounter with the worlds beyond, and Killian had little doubt that he could help his clients. People tended to assign an almost magical quality to the other side. Still, for people like him, people who could see the ripples, it's easy to help people plagued by these entities. After an hour of collecting notes and making adjustments to them, Killian went out into the house to begin compiling further data. It was a very active day within the house. The sofa the couple had been sitting on earlier kept disappearing and reappearing outside on the curve. It was replaced by a red love seat, the same color as the chair he'd noticed earlier. No matter how many times Barbara and Michael took it out and brought their couch back in, it always reappeared on the curb. Finally, they stopped trying, and Barbara fell into despair as she flopped onto the red couch. The couch was something they had bought after they were married, and with Killian's help, they managed to move it to the side yard where it stayed put. The ripples continued to move through the house. The male moved about in a state of constant action, going from living room to kitchen and then back to the back of the house with some rapidity. The female entity continued to move about the kitchen haphazardly, and then did the same thing in the living room for most of the afternoon. The child was not in evidence, but every now and again, Killian would hear a name called or catch a snatch of song as something sang or hummed. Excuse me. He followed them with his eyes as they went about their tasks, and even though Barbara and Michael couldn't see them, Killian was pretty sure that they could feel them moving around the house. That night, the activity reached a crescendo. As they sat at the dinner table, a multitude of ethereal voices came rolling out of the living room like cathedral bells. Michael and Barbara whipped about to look at the noises, scared by the chatter in their living room. To Killian's eyes, it was as though 100 stones had been thrown at once, around the couch, around the TV, going towards the back, and slowly trickling into the kitchen. He could see not just 2 forms, but the wavy outlines of many others. At first, he thought there might be 5, but after a few minutes, he decided it might be 10. Excuse me. Suddenly, things began moving. Cabinets opened and closed at random. The fridge rattled under a mechanical rapidity of use. The TV blared, the microwave beeped, and all around them the ethereal voices talked and laughed. It was all Killian could do to herd Michael and Barbara into the guest bedroom. "What is going on out there?" she cried. She and Michael huddled on the bed in terror, clutching at each other for comfort. "It's never been this bad before." "This isn't the first time I've seen something like this," Killian confided, opening the door a little so he could peek out. "The presences are getting stronger. Before long, it'll be impossible to get rid of them." Barbara collapsed into tears, and Michael held her as the din outside rose like an angry sea. Killian watched at the door, counting the swirls and seeing the indents left on the couch. One of the swirls actually wobbled towards him and threw the door open to the horror of Michael and Barbara. Killian heard a slurry voice whispering something about a bathroom before wandering off down the hall. Finally, around midnight, it all seemed to settle down. Killian suggested they get some sleep while the presences were at rest. They moved like scared rabbits down the hall, eyes flickering every which way as they went. Killian watched them until the door closed and then began getting ready to sleep himself. He threw his suit jacket over the post, but put his hat on top. He kicked his shoes off and lay in the comfortable embrace of the sheets as his eyes drifted towards sleep. It had been a long day, and he was ready to get some sleep, if sleep would come. No sooner had he settled himself than an unearthly wail split the air. It was followed by both Michael and Barbara screaming his name as he flew off the bed and into the hall. He went to their bedroom and saw two rippling forms standing on either side of the bed. He didn't have to ask if they could see them. The ripples were a steady wave of energy, and Killian could tell that they were seeing their intruders for the first time. "What's wrong, honey?" said the male presence. He was dressed in pajamas, and his hair was rumpled as though he had been roused from sleep. The other figure was clearly the female, her robe pulled around her and her long, straight hair swishing down her back. The two were on either side of the bed, and it seemed that they were looking at something between Barbara and Michael. Suddenly, from the center of their bed, a voice, a crystalline highness, shivered across his ears. "I saw something. I don't know what it was." The female presence leaned down and nearly fell into Barbara. Barbara scuttled away from it, and Michael pulled her to him as he switched his gaze between the apparitions. The female presence sat up suddenly, and in her arms was a shimmering child, a girl Killian thought, who stared at the pair on the bed as though she could see them. As Barbara and the child made eye contact, Killian heard her scream in a fit of panic. Her shriek sent both of the wavering apparitions stumbling back a little, and made the shimmering child loose a cry of its own. "Get out! Get out of my house! I hate you! I wish you would leave me alone!" Barbara screamed at the three of them. The rumpled man looked at the other, and both fled out into the hallway. A door slammed somewhere in the house, and Killian could hear it being locked behind them. Barbara shuddered in fear and rage and collapsed into Michael's arms, sobbing. He could commiserate with them. It was always hard when something you couldn't fight invaded your house, but they needed to be strong now. Killian told the two of them to secure their door and get some rest while they made plans for tomorrow. He knew there would be no sleep for him as he set about making plans of attack for the next day. He set plans and counterplans that night, covering all his angles, and when dawn broke the next day, he was ready to help them. They sat in the living room, sipping coffee, and Killian could see the female presence passing around the house, the child's presence not far behind her, and sometimes it would stop to glance at them on the couch as though it could see them. The male presence seemed to be absent for some reason, but Killian felt sure that it would return later. The female talked to herself near continuously as the child sobbed and tugged at her. Killian tried to ignore them before the presences gathered together again. They would need a plan. "You must summon all your strength together and push them out of the house," he told them, as they sat on the red love seat that wasn't theirs. Barbara sobbed a little, her nerves frazzled. How? How do we do that?" "This house belongs to the two of you, not these things that have taken up residence here. You must focus your will and push them out before they become too strong. Summon up all your happy memories of the house, good times and bad times, and times that brought you closer, and form them in your mind. When the time comes, we'll draw strength from those things and use them to push these malicious presences out." So, they spent the day gathering memories that made this house a home for them. They talked about buying the house, raising their children, living, loving, enjoying their lives. They cried a lot, and Killian felt like a voyeur as they wept in each other's arms on the lurid red sofa. As darkness gathered, Killian felt the male presence return and moved them to the guest room again so they could summon up the last of their strength. He watched from the door as they all moved about the house. when all the presences gathered in the living room. "Hey, Grim, good to see you." Where were we? The presences began to gather in the living room. The ethereal sound of their entertainment spilled into the guest room, but tonight the gathering was more intimate. It was just the three of them this time, no spectral legion like before, and Killian brought Barbara and Michael into the living room and stood them before the couch. Killian gave them a nod, turning off the lights in the living room. The effect on the presence was immediate. The male form, seated between the other two, looked around and brought both the smaller forms closer to him. It was a protective gesture, but it mattered little. That's fine, man. It doesn't take much these days. "Now," Killian said. When he shouted, he saw all three stiffen in their seats. "Take the hand of each other and cast these interlopers from your house." Michael reached for Barbara's hand, and she grasped it tightly. As they clutched hands, Killian could see a glow surrounding them as it had encircled the presence the night before. Both seemed to pulse with light, and the forms before them began to quiver as they saw them fully. Both Michael and Barbara shouted their ire, their contempt, their rage, their sorrow to the intruders. At that moment, Killian saw them for who they really were, the waxy flesh of the recently deceased, the puffy, jaundiced skin on their face, and the dark bruises beneath their eyes as their death masks were revealed. Asphyxiation, he thought, maybe a gas leak or something, but whatever the nature of their deaths, their ghostly visage caused an immediate reaction in the presences before them. "Get out of our house," they yelled repeatedly, and Killian moved up behind them to add his strength to theirs. When he dropped his hands onto their shoulders, he felt his own throat open up as Killian retook his true form. He'd known his death was coming in life, his killer's glee the last sound that he had heard as a mortal, but he knew from the years beyond the pale that it was a grisly sight to behold. The screams of the intruders nearly dwarfed the otherworldly voices of Barbara and Michael. The two larger presences grabbed their child and fled the house. The ghostly trio stood silently as the sound of a car escaping split the night like a shrieking train. "We did it," Barbara said, she and Michael now back to their initial selves. "They're gone. We have our house back," she cried, and both of them threw their arms around each other and laughed as they hugged and sobbed. "Yes, but I doubt they'll be gone for long," Killian said, collecting his bag and preparing to leave. Both of them stopped their celebration and looked at him. Killian took the opportunity to fish a pamphlet out of his bag. "The living are never gone for very long, I'm afraid. In the light of day, they laugh off their fears and return to a place they now must call home. They chalk up the presents to a bit of bad dinner or a headache. As Scrooge put it, there's more gravy than of grave about you." He handed them the pamphlet, and Barbara took it in a shaky hand. "I would suggest that you leave this place soon. If they believe what they saw tonight, they may return with a religious or some other person. They can banish you from this place, and believe me when I say you would find the process very unpleasant." "Leave? But where would we go?" "On to the next plane of being. Heaven, hell, Shangri-La, doesn't matter to me, but this small victory won't last. Stay if you like. It is ultimately your decision. But know that someday you will need to pass on. Better to pass peacefully than be swept out like old trash." He collected his hat and coat and shook their hands as he parted. "If you need the agency's help again, don't hesitate to ask. We're always here if you need us." Killian opened the door and looked out into the inky blackness of the void. He had no idea what lay beyond. That's why the agency had been so keen to have him. Maybe these two could find some peace there. The living always wondered what comes after death. If they knew it was like this, Killian doubted so many would seek it. Someone said the living often envy the dead. As a member of them, he could honestly say the grass wasn't much greener on the other side. And I think that'll do it for us tonight, guys. My voice is getting wrecked. But yeah, it was fun. I love doing live streams with you guys. It's always a good time. Again, don't forget to vote for the Monday story. It looks like Black Site 12 has got it at this point, but there's still another day on it. We may get a surprise. But yeah. Hope you guys will join us next time. Hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later. I'm thinking probably... Let's see. Well, thank you, Grim. Let's see. Probably the 7th. The 7th of December will be the next opportunity when we can do a live stream. So I'll keep you guys posted. Technically, I guess, Jennifer, it would be kind of in the middle, I would think. Like, you would have to know Paranormal Facilitator to know what he was talking about. Well, thanks, guys. That's one of my favorites. I really want to give Killian the book he deserves one of these days. Grim, probably about 7 p.m. Central Time, like usual. 7, 8, probably. I'll make a post about it before I do it. All right, guys, it's been a gas. We'll catch you next time for more great stories and more cool stuff. Till then, Dr. Plague, signing off. Yeah, Grim, I'd like that. That would be cool. Yes, probably. Shoot me an email, man. We'll get together and do something like that. That'd be cool. All right, guys. Dr. Plague, signing off.